Hello, the internet. Welcome to the 2020 Virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival, or as we like to call it, the VGBF. I am Phil Kaminsky, your host, and although we miss hosting you in person, we are so happy that you've chosen to spend your time with us for today's watch party. Before we jump to today's main event, I'm going to ask you to do three little tiny but super important things for us. First, please like this video. We'd like you to like the video. Second, leave a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. And third, please hit the subscribe bell so that you can receive notifications about our latest and upcoming presentations. Also, we ask you to please support today's authors by purchasing their books. Independent bookseller and VGBF partner, the one and only Politics and Prose, has them all, and you can pick them up online right now. Finally, we would like to thank our featured sponsor, the David and Mikel Blair Family Foundation. Your support is immensely appreciated. Okay, let's get started. Today, we are extremely fortunate to have with us Nic Stone, author of an original series starring the breakout character from Marvel's Black Panther comics and films, none other than T'Challa's younger sister, Shuri. A skilled martial artist, Shuri is also a witty master of science and technology. In this highly anticipated novel, Shuri sets out on a quest to save her homeland of Wakanda. Nic Stone is the New York Times best-selling author of Dear Martin and Odd One Out. She graduated from Spelman College, upon which she worked extensively in teen mentoring. Nic also grew up immersed in a wide range of cultures, religions, and backgrounds, stories of which she strives to include in her own work. Interviewing Ms. Stone today is Ronald L. Smith, award-winning author of children's literature, including the novels Black Panther, The Young Prince, The Mesmerist, The Owls Have Come to Take Us Away, and Gloomtown. His first novel, Hoodoo, earned him the 2016 Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Author Award, as well as the ILA Award for Intermediate Fiction. Welcome, Nic and Ron.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
How goes?
We're good. I'm good.
Yeah.
How are you, Nic?
It's a weird time, but it's good.
It is a weird time.
Trying to be productive, while I'm home.
That's right. We're all trying to be productive under very enduring, tough circumstances.
Agreed.
So that's my first question. Like, how are you dealing with the global pandemic? I mean, you're in Atlanta. Like, what's life been like? I know you've been busy. I know you've been doing online festivals and stuff. So just how are you coping with the world right now, the world we're living in?
It's different, to say the least. I am extroverted in the extreme, so it has been a bit of a struggle not actually getting to talk to people, like see and talk to people face to face. I was actually telling someone the other day about how difficult I find it to do these virtual festivals, largely because there's no feedback. I love speaking and being in front of a crowd and interacting with people, but part of the reason I love that is because of the interaction you're getting with all of these people around you. And it's like literally shouting into the void of my computer as I do a live keynote from my home office. Like, it's weird, but yeah, hanging in there. Kids are keeping me busy.
Right. That's the fun part of festivals. That's where the buzz comes from, is interacting and meeting readers and fans and seeing other author friends. And that's all just been kind of stripped away. So we'll do what we can these next few months, who knows how long, but it's the new normal, which has been over.
It is.
Well, I was happy to get a copy of Shuri, and I absolutely loved it. I read it in record time, and it blew me away. I mean, it was fantastic. So the first question I have for you is, does your phone answer to Hey Siri or Hey Shuri?
I wish it answered to Hey Shuri. That would be amazing. And honestly, this is high praise coming from you, because I loved what you did in your Black Panther novel. When I remember reading yours and thinking about how cool it was that you were plucking these characters out of Wakanda and dropping them into Chicago. And it was just like, that's really brilliant. So when I was working on Shuri, I thought about where I could send her, because at this point, she's never left Wakanda. And I wanted her to leave Wakanda and go to somewhere different, but also like kind of familiar. So it was a lot of fun to write. And I'm hoping that as people read it and they visit, like they'll visit Kenya and they'll visit the UK. And my hope is that visiting those two places through the lens of somebody who's never been there before will make for like a really exciting reading experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, thank you for your compliments on the book. And we won't get into any spoilers. I know the book just came out, but we'll just try to keep it vague and interesting. And of course, people, I'm sure, want to pick it up. But tell me first about your experience with Marvel and Black Panther before you got this gig. Like, what was it like for you to get the call to do this? What was it like for you to delve into a world that has such a dedicated, cool fan base? What was that like for you?
Terrifying and also really exciting. I screamed in an airport when I when I got the initial email. I, like everyone, saw the Black Panther film when it came out in 2018, and I left the theater and told my husband that I had to figure out a way that I could write a book about that Shuri person. Like, I was like, that Shuri character totally stole the show, and I got to figure out how I can write a book about her. And I mentioned you and Jason Reynolds to my husband when I was saying this, because, you know, Jason did the Miles Morales novel and you did the Black Panther Young Prince novel. And it was just like, this is a thing that people do. And I know that people do this, and I want to be able to do this somehow. And I had no idea how. Right. So then when I get this email, like, I think it was somewhere between 6 and 8 months later, I like lost my mind in the airport, like completely lost it. But it's been the most fun thing, I will say, is getting to do, honestly, similar to what you did, is like we're getting to build out a backstory that doesn't necessarily exist in canon, right? Because in the comic canon, we first meet Shuri when she's in her late teens, right, like kind of early 20s. And in the film, she's a little younger. She's like 16 or 17. So getting to write her at 14 was getting to create something that just doesn't exist. And that took some of the pressure off. Like, I didn't have to worry about like accuracy when it came to like making sure I'm hitting these points in canon, because they don't exist in canon yet.
Right. You can take your own spin on it. It doesn't have to match up with, you know, whatever happened in the universe. I mean, you can do your own thing with it, which was great for me, because it gives you amount of freedom to like create your own story with characters in a landscape that already exists, but bring your own personal magic and personal storytelling to it, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it was fun. Like, that made it really fun, getting to wiggle around a little bit. I had fun with some of the cameos that I got to put in that first book.
There's some good cameos, people.
I had a lot of fun with those cameos. Yeah, and like and I put some in the second book too, because it's just such like, the Marvel universe is so rich. And I think about the fact that Black Panther is a storyline that was started in the 1960s by a white man. This is like the thick of the civil rights movement. Everything is nuts in this country. And you have this man, Stan Lee, who decides he is going to create a fictional nation in Africa that is completely untouched by colonization. And like, that was absolutely revolutionary. And to get to be a part of that legacy has been nothing short of amazing.
Right. And it's so much fun to talk about this in schools too. I'm sure you're going to be back on, well, hopefully you'll be in person in schools, but it's so
eventually, right?
It's so much fun to talk to kids about the history of the Black Panther universe and what was happening at the time it was created. And I think at one time they called him the Coal Tiger.
Gotta love it.
The Coal Tiger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what I really liked about the book is seeing the world of Wakanda through a female perspective, through Shuri's eyes. And without giving anything away, you know, there's a moment where she's reflecting and she's looking at the portraits of the former Black Panthers throughout history. And she's wondering about, where are the queens? Where are the Dora Milaje? Where are their portraits? How come they're not being honored? And I thought that was, wow, that is really interesting. You know, because Wakanda somewhat is a patriarchal kind of society, I would think, right?
It is, right?
Say it, but it is, right? Yeah. So what is it like so that was cool to see Shuri thinking those thoughts, because you went deeper into what is this society really like. So obviously that was something you wanted to talk about and show the importance of.
Yeah, so I got to have this really great conversation the other day about what it means to be a girl, right? And I think I remember being 12 or 13, 12, 13, 14, and coming to realize that like I had responsibilities that my brother wasn't going to have, just by virtue of me being a girl. Like there is an expectation of this nurturing thing that we're supposed to be able to do, and we're supposed to be able to like solve problems, and there are all of these unspoken expectations I think put on girls that aren't that are different from the ones that are put on boys. And so you have this young lady who has recognized that she has a responsibility, right? Like she is in this country, she's 13, but she is first in line to the throne of a nation. And she is also fully cognizant of the fact that her father was killed and that his brother had to step in and take over. So she knows that if something were to happen to her brother, she needs to be ready. And that makes her think about like, well, what has happened in the past, right? Like how has it happened that there's never been a female Black Panther? Where are the daughters of the queens and kings of the past, right? Like we know that the queens are the women who married the kings, and the sons are the guys who carried on the throne and have carried on the legacy. But what of the royal daughters? And it's a question that Shuri asks, and she leans pretty heavily into it, because if there is one thing I can say about her, she is not one to just kind of settle into the role that's being carved out for her. And I think that's one of the things that makes her such an endearing character for people. She was this way in the movie where she was just kind of like irreverent,
Right.
and she was not that princess that was sitting back staying quiet. Like she's this tech genius and she's making all of these things, and people are really heavily dependent on her. And I wanted it to be clear that she recognizes this dependence and she feels a way about it.
Well, you did a great job with that. And that follows a thread throughout the book where we see her really, her interior monologue about who she is and what she represents and what her responsibility is to her friends, to her family, to the nation. And I just thought it was a really great insight into the character and the larger world of Wakanda. Let me look at my notes. Oh, okay. I want to know what else is on PantherTube.
PantherTube is basically like YouTube in Wakanda, right? So I made this thing up called the PantherTube, really for humor. I did my best to inject a lot of humor into this book and a lot of banter. And the most important thing for me in these books, in these Shuri books, was showing that Shuri has a friend. Because when I saw the movie, that was the one thing that kind of got under my skin a little bit. And of course, the movie wasn't about her. And as a secondary character, typically, she didn't actually have a ton of screen time. Just the screen time that she did have, she was so like vibrant that she stuck with you. But I really left wanting to know about her friends. Like, does she have friends? Is there anybody that she interacts with? So I got to create this best friend character for her. And this best friend character is very much her polar opposite in a lot of ways. And she's very like into watching like beauty videos on what is the Wakandan equivalent of YouTube. And I really did want to have these touch points in this book that American kids can kind of connect with, while also having a very specific Wakanda type experience, right? Because if Wakanda is this nation no one knows about, YouTube, I don't know, is a thing that would exist there. So I did my best to just kind of inject these little access points that that will help kids connect.
That's really fun to play around with those kind of things that we know so well. And Wakanda is an isolated nation and it's secretive. So you just feel like there's another point in there where I think you talked something about basketball. I'm trying to remember now, but it's just fun to put those kind of, to see Shuri and her friends thinking about things that are so commonplace here.
Right. Yeah. Like there's one of my favorite parts is she makes a reference to Spider-Man, but she doesn't call him Spider-Man because she doesn't know that's what he's called.
Right.
But she calls him Spidery Guy. There's a bead on her bracelet that she arms with like a sound boost or something, and she says she saw it on the PantherTube. Some spidery guy who swings around New York. So those little Easter eggs are really fun.
They are fun.
And they were really fun.
Um, okay, so Shuri's a scientist. She's a high-tech wizard. There's a lot of stuff that's going on with the heart-shaped herb in this book. And when I was reading it, her mind is going like this so fast. And I'm just wondering, like the scientific stuff, like the botany and the pH balance and the this, that, I'm like, this is really wild. What kind of research did you do to get this kind of plant-based biology, molecular stuff? What was that like to research this stuff? Because I would be like
So
totally lost.
yeah, so what's funny is like this is totally my bag. Like I am a science nerd. Nobody has any idea. Well, everybody will have an idea now, but like that was honestly the reason I was so excited about taking this on is because at 12 and 13, at Shuri's age, I was that girl who was literally obsessed with black holes. Like I would check out books from the library and just do hours and hours of research on black holes. Like what is the event horizon? What would actually happen if you got sucked into a black hole? So getting to write this book and explore all of these other sciences was just so much fun. All of it is pretty accurate. Like, of course, nothing with vibranium is accurate because vibranium isn't real. But even that was fun getting to. Right, exactly.
I got some from Marvel. They gave me some.
I have these earrings. I should have worn those earrings instead of these, but I have these earrings that have this kind of like glowy, glittery thing that look like, I call them my vibranium earrings. But it's just this metal, and this metal is given these fictional scientific properties, but because they are genuine scientific properties, I was able to use them in a scientific way. And that was, it's my shout out to the kids like me who are who are African American or African or Black or kids of color who are whip smart and who maybe get made fun of a little bit for it. Because that was definitely my experience. I was that kid who got clowned constantly because I would like see something happen and start rambling about the trajectory, and all of a sudden we're talking about like hypotenuses and things, and people are looking at me like, what are you talking about? So getting to write that version of me kind of into the story was so much fun. The research was really, really fun.
Oh, that is so much fun. That's great. Fantastic. You mentioned Shuri's best friend, Kamara, whom I loved, and she's so great. We can talk a little bit about her without spoiling anything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's on her way to becoming a Dora Milaje.
Yes.
And I just found them to be the perfect foil, to each other. And some of the stuff that Kamara says is just so drop dead funny. Did you know right away that you were going to definitely need a sidekick with her? A side
100%. 100%. Like zero doubt about it. Largely because as a girl that age, I was nothing without my best friend. My best friend at 13, her name is Alex. And she actually was the basis for a character in another book that I wrote. She is the basis for Ray in Odd One Out. And there's something super powerful about having that foil, as you call it, like having that person who is different from you, but you have enough similarities where it's a thing that works. And it's interesting because kind of at the beginning of the story, the friendship is strained from Shuri's perspective, because Shuri would rather she doesn't really want to socialize. Like she would rather just like be in her lab. So having this friend who is the granddaughter of the mining heiress, like she's the mining heiress. So she's the granddaughter of the head of the mining tribe. And they just so happen to become friends around their 10th birthdays. And Shuri is fully convinced that her mother basically set her up with this friendship.
What I was going to say. It was almost like an arranged friendship.
It's like this arranged friendship that she takes issue with at first. But as the book progresses, you see that these girls really do need each other and that they feed off of each other. And there is no fixing the problem or solving the case or whatever. They can't do it without each other. And I think that is friendship is something I really did want to touch on in this book, both the power of friendship and just collaboration and how important collaboration is as we move through life.
Right. Well, you did it very well, because, and it's good that they have this tension. It's not like they're just besties right away. I mean, there's some tension there, like you said, and they get to know each other a little bit better. They both see something in the other that they didn't know was there before necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really, really handled well. What I also found interesting is how you showed Wakanda, how it's viewed through other African nations. Because it just, the movies, the book, yeah, Wakanda forever, yeah, Wakanda this, Wakanda that. What about the other
Uh-huh.
countries surrounding Wakanda? What would that be like in real life to have other African countries around Wakanda? What do they think of the nation? What do they? So I thought that was really interesting to get that rolling. I mean, if Wakanda was out there waiting for us to visit, how can I phrase this? What do you think would be best for them? Should they remain an isolated kind of country, or should they reach out and help surrounding nations and other countries with their resources, or should they remain this kind of insular community of people? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think would be what do you think would be the best way for them to operate as a country?
I mean, look, that's like the bajillion-dollar question. I think that I understand why they have decided to remain isolated, especially considering things that have happened in the surrounding countries. But this is the same question that was kind of tugged at in the Black Panther film. It's this
Yeah,
idea of you have all of these resources and all of this power and technology, and you use it to keep yourself safe. But is there some kind of moral obligation to kind of help your fellow man?
hmm,
Jason Reynolds and I were talking about this the other day, how in the film you have the king of Wakanda's brother, of course, is dropped off in the United States, and he's supposed to be on this mission, and he comes to notice all of these horrible things, and it shifts the way he feels about some stuff. um, and it's like he has this kid and nobody comes back for him,
right,
right? and,
right.
and it's a thing that I
Yep.
also wondered about, was just kind of like,
Mhm.
y'all, why are you out there in the first place if your goal is to stay hidden?
Right.
And why didn't you go back to get these people who supposedly belong to you? So
Right.
I honestly, I don't really have an answer. I think that there is some value in recognizing a utopia as just that, right? Like, utopias aren't real. Like, they are places, this notion of like this place on earth where there's no pain and everybody loves each other and everybody's super supportive of each other, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds really great,
Right.
but at what cost
Right.
to the rest of the world? Is
Right.
it even the responsibility of Wakanda to help the rest of the world? Like, these
That's
are
good.
questions I really want kids. I want kids to grapple with these questions because I think they're
Oh,
good ones.
absolutely. And speaking of that leads to my next question, is because you get to some real world issues like global warming.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the Pan African Congress. You talk about decolonization, all this stuff. So, how important is it for you to talk to kids about this stuff? I mean, uh, what do you want them to take away from these larger world issues? Is just education? I mean, I see that you're just getting at some real world issues in the book. And I think it's cool for kids to walk away with that knowledge without being taught it in a class or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
getting it from a book, from an author that you love, to get these real world questions and issues talked about, without being too heavy in the book itself.
Yeah, I just think it's important that kids have an opportunity to grapple with some stuff, right? Like, I'm not asking 8 to 12-year-old children to solve the problem of climate change. Like that, like that is not the request
We've got Greta
that
Thunberg
is
for that.
being made. Like, hey, you 8 to 12-year-olds everywhere, we need you to fix the hole in the ozone layer. Like that's just unrealistic. But I do think that these are the people who are going to inherit this world. They need to know
Right.
what's happening inside of it. And I take this same stance with my own children. My sons are almost 8 and almost 4, and my almost 8-year-old is reading one of my other books right now. He's reading Clean Getaway, and Clean
Mm,
Getaway's got some pretty heavy stuff in it. Like, it's a book that I wrote really to address racism for a middle grade audience.
mhm.
And it looks at some heavy stuff in the history of the United States. There's some civil rights history in there. And my 7-year-old, he came into my room crying this morning because he got to a part that hit him. It hit him pretty hard. And so we talked about it, and we talked about moral obligations. We talked about what happens when you have to make a decision between hurting one person and potentially hurting another person. Like, life isn't as easy or as cut and dried as I think we would like to make children believe it is. And so I think we do them a disservice when we don't allow them to grapple with things like climate change. So that's really, that's all it's about for me, is putting material into a form that children can consume and then ask questions about. And I think it's important as adults that we are willing to say when we don't have the answers. Like, that's the other piece of this, is I, as the parent, I'm not going to pretend and lie to you about a question that I can't answer, but I will help direct you to a place where you can find the answer, AKA the internet. With my supervision, I will help you Google this thing so that you can find out more information.
That's great. And that's the right way to do it too, because, you know, putting it in fiction, in a novel, in a story, and without being moralized or preached to, because kids just turn off to that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't have kids, but I would imagine that's true. And just from my school visits, you know, you see how smart kids are, and they don't want to be preached to. They don't want a lesson. They just want a good story. And if you can impart some kind of knowledge in there, sneak it in, then that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and they will straight up let you know when they disagree. And that's a thing that I very much appreciate. I appreciate that kids can be, once they have permission, they can be very discerning. And I think it's a thing that we should encourage. I think that that's a thing that we should encourage as adults.
Absolutely. Speaking of kids, I have some kid questions for you.
Yes.
Okay, here they go. Did you actually get to go to Wakanda for research?
Oh, totally. I can't tell you exactly where it is because I'm not allowed to, but I did. I got to drop in there. They let me in to do the research through the forest. It was good.
All right, awesome. Did you meet Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri in the film?
I have not gotten to meet her yet. I hope I will eventually. We tried really, really hard to get her to voice the audiobook, and unfortunately it didn't work out. It's okay. Anika Noni Rose is the voice, is narrating the audiobook, and of course does a spectacular job.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that's exciting. Eventually, I do hope I will get to meet her, even if that means I have to keep writing these books until the movie comes out, and so I'll get invited to the premiere like that. Like, I'll write 12 of them if that's what it takes. Yeah.
Okay. If you lived in Wakanda, what would your job be? Would you still be a writer? What would you do?
I think, I don't know. I think it would function differently. Like, I would be like a storyteller. Like, I don't know that I would like write it down necessarily. It's interesting, right? The idea of books as a form of commerce. I don't know that that's a thing. I'm interested to know. I need to think about this, if that's a thing that would exist in Wakanda. Like, obviously there are textbooks.
Yeah, digital textbooks.
There are digital textbooks. She's got some old school like paper textbooks. Yeah. But I wonder if there are like authors who write books and then sell them to people, or if there are more, if it's more of a storytelling thing. Because I think about it in many African traditions, your storytellers, they weren't writing things down. You went and you listened to the storyteller. And I think that's the job that I would want to have.
It's an oral tradition,
Yeah, the oral storytellers.
Right. Okay, what's your favorite thing about writing for young people?
The young people, the interaction I get to have with the young people as a result. Also, it's just really fun, like getting to be a kid while you're writing and getting to just live this life of wonder. Like that's my favorite thing about being a writer in general, is all of the things that I get to explore as a result of needing to have the information to put it in the book. One of my favorite chunks of research I did, not for this version, not for this story, but for the next one, I had this very in-depth conversation with the head of cybersecurity for this like major organization. And I learned all of this stuff about hacking, and like there's this thing called a hack back, where if you're actively being hacked, you can hack your hacker. and
Wow.
stop the hacking and it's just as wild. It's so wild. But getting to learn all of these new things
Yeah.
is so much fun. And I mean, with Kidlit, like, you get to learn it and then you get to present it in a way that's digestible, which means you're learning it even better.
Cool. So if you had not become a writer, you were talking about when you were a kid, science, all that stuff. Do you think you would be, what do you think your career would be?
So before I got my first literary agent, I was headed into neuropsychology.
Wow.
So I love people, as I mentioned, extremely extroverted, and I love science. So it's a combination of neuroscience and psychology. And it is the coolest. Like, it's a thing where, like, if at any point I'm like, okay, I need to take like a 3 or 4 year break from writing, I would totally go back and study it just to do it, because it's so interesting.
Wonderful. That's great. How many stories are we going to see with Shuri? I mean, this series, like what can we expect in the future?
That's a really good question. The first contract was for 2. So the second one comes out in February of next year, which is really exciting. And then we'll see. I've got a few more kicking around in my brain. So we'll see what we come up with.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've got some quick kind of craft questions coming up. And one of them is, we often hear that writers have to write every day. I know I get that a lot when I go visit schools. And you hear that from other writers and other artists. And do you think that a writer has to write every day to be successful?
I don't write every day. So I'll just
I don't know
put
any
that out
writers,
there.
published writers who do.
I will put that out
But
there.
somebody keeps calling that. Somebody keeps saying that. To write
But
every day.
look, I will say there was a point where I did write every day. And I do think there is something to be said for developing a habit and getting into practice with doing a thing to the point where even if you were to stop, you could pop back in a few days later and you would have no problem picking back up where you left off. In the beginning, I couldn't have put something down for 3 days and then jumped right back into it. Like, I don't think I could have done that. But now, like, I don't have a choice. Like, I'll be writing a book and then I have to go to a 3-day festival, and trying to write at a festival, you just aren't going to get a whole lot done. So there's this training, I think, that happens as you write more and more and more. So it's not a bad thing to practice. I wouldn't say anybody has to write every day, but it can't hurt.
It's hard to write out of the environment for me. Our friend, Jeff Sentner, Serpent King, said he wrote a lot of that on the bus.
On the bus. He wrote, I think, all 3 of his first 3 novels he wrote during his commute on his cell phone with his thumb.
I find that remarkable.
It's why there's no way. Like, first of all, there'd be typos. I'm going to plug my computer in, so my head's going to disappear, but I can still hear you.
Right. All right, cool. So another craft question is, what is your writing space like? And what do you have to do for the muse to visit? So, like, do you have a space? Is it confined to one space? Do you have any rituals? Is it the tea and the incense and the light goes out and the music goes on? Or do you just get it wherever you can get it?
Look, I got 2 kids.
I know. As soon as I was asking, I kind of knew.
Right now, my writing space right now, I can see it out the window. I'm in my home office right now, that I am currently redoing. Like, I'm like flipping it and redoing it. I like bought a new rug and a new coffee table and new bookshelves and stuff yesterday, that will all come, and then my office will be really pretty and very, very pink. You can't tell, but like the couch that I'm sitting on is pink. So everything will be pink in here. However, I rarely actually write in here because my children are here. Really, it's either I'm not home or the children are home, and so you can't really get anything done. So I'm looking out my window at an orange tint that is sitting staked into the ground in my backyard, because that, for the past few weeks, is where I have gone to write. I leave my cell phone in the house. Right. You gotta have like a side space. So I leave my phone in the house and I'll go outside, turn the Wi-Fi off of my computer, and I'm able to like be one with nature and whatever.
Well, you've got an infinity gauntlet right back there. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I can. I've been trying to decide what to do about this coronavirus. I haven't figured it out yet.
Okay, we got a couple more. How long are your writing sessions? How like you try to get in an hour a day or like 500 words? I mean, I know it's kind of haphazard as you just said, but do you have to get in 500 words? Do you have to get in a page or?
Well, if I'm actively drafting, I try to do a chapter. So it depends on what I'm writing, right? So if I am writing a novel, I am a very intense, staunch outliner. So once I start drafting, I will write my goal is to write a chapter a day. So with a middle grade novel, I aim for about 30,000 words, and it's usually broken down into 20 or so chapters. So I can write if I am as focused as I can be, I can do 1,500 words a day. I can knock out a middle grade novel in about 20 days, a draft of one. And that's at 1,500 words a day, because 1,500 words per chapter. When it comes to other stuff, like short stories, there's a little bit of a different process, but really my goal is just to write like a set chunk per day, whether it's a chapter or a section or really either a chapter or a section. And sometimes it takes a few hours, sometimes it takes all day. It just kind of depends on what else is going on around me.
Well, one of the questions was whether you were a plotter or a pantster, and I think you just answered by saying you're an outliner.
Plot.
Yeah, I fly by the seat of my pants
I can't.
I know.
I have tried.
Yes, we're saying the same thing. I've tried Scrivener. I've tried these things, and I try to outline in my brain. So I have to find the story as I'm writing it. I would love to have an outline, but yeah, I've tried to outline, but I admire people who can do it and really know where the story's going before they get there. So it's admirable.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? But I do think that like your first draft and my outline are basically the same thing. Like we're both figuring out the story. You just figure it out in a longer form.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Okay, so we're coming up on the end here. We've got 3 quick questions. What TV shows and movies are you watching right now? If you have any time to.
None. The exception is Batwoman. I'm watching Batwoman on the CW on Sunday nights. But other than that, I just typically during the day, my kids are right now they're both doing remote learning. So we're on this like very tight schedule. They often need a good bit of assistance. And it's hard, like I can't enter into a story and then have a kid like tap me on my shoulder. Like it doesn't really work. So I escape to the tent when I can, and when I can't, most of my evening will go to working on whatever it is I'm working on at the moment. Right. I tend to be a binger. Like I'll wait until the whole thing is out, and then I'll take like a weekend and watch the entire season. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I've been watching a lot of kiddie movies, a lot of things that are animated. Because the Rugrats, and also because they're actually really good. Like they're really good movies. Frozen 2 was hitting.
I've seen Frozen 2. I've seen Frozen 2
was real. It was popping. Well, and then did you see? Okay, Onward was really fantastic. And then the Trolls World Tour movie. So we did like a whole watch party because they released it, and we watched it like 3 or 4 times. It was really good.
All right, so let's see, 2 more, 1 more. Yes, 1 more. What advice would you give to adults who want to write children's literature?
Ooh, my first piece of advice.
Everybody wants to.
Right. My first piece of advice is to like hang out with some children and make sure this is what you want to do with your life. I think the most important thing for me in developing as a children's writer has been learning not to forget what it was like to be young, forcing myself back into memories of being young and refusing to judge refusing to judge myself or judge some of the decisions that I made as a young person, letting things that happened when I was young be things that happened when I was young and presenting them as such in text. Because I think that I have read books where it's very clear that this adult person wanted to write a children's book because they have a lesson to teach the children, and like that it never works. That will never ever work in children's literature. So it's important to just let kids be kids on the page, and let kids be kids like in your own life. And also recognize that like this isn't easy, so make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into.
I agree 100%. Nic, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I look forward to seeing you at a book festival somewhere, hopefully soon somewhere.
Yes, maybe in the fall, something.
We shall see. But everybody out there, I really love the book Shuri. It's fantastic. It's fast-paced. It's energetic. It's a lot of fun, and everybody should go read it, buy it now at your favorite independent bookstore. So Nic,
Thank
thanks
you.
a lot. Great to see you.
Yes, and everybody also get Black Panther, The Young Prince, and read them together because they are excellent in conversation with one another, if I do say so myself.
Awesome.
Thank you, Nic and Ron. It was a pleasure having you both here with us today, and today's presentation was just awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Oh, sorry. I'd like to thank each of you out there on the World Wide Web for tuning in. Furthermore, I know that you'd love to own a copy of Nic's new book, Shuri, as well as Ron's books. So head over to Politics and Prose. Their website is politics-prose.com, where you can place your orders. You can also click the link in the description box that we have below. And there we have it. So, we have many more fantastic author presentations headed your way over the course of the next 4 weeks. Each of these will be accessible right here on the VGBF YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe bell for all notifications. And for a full list of VGBF programming, feel free to click on Gaithersburg.bookfestival.org. Again, that's Gaithersburg.bookfestival.org. I am your VGBF host, Phil Kaminsky. Keep reading, everyone, and have a terrific day.